We're going to be taking communion at the end of the service. So hopefully you got one of these as you came in. If you're watching at home, just want to encourage you, this is a good moment to jump out, grab some stuff so you can join us in communion as we close out the service. This is our final week as we close out summer, as we close out this series of thinking who is like the Lord. And we're going to look at one last characteristic of how he describes himself. It's a strange element of what he's about to say, and we get a little confused by the wording. I'll give you an example of how we tend to think of it. Kim and I have been married for 32 years. We dated about 4.5 years before that. So it's crazy to me sometimes to think that we've been together about 37-ish years. When we were dating together, we had a really fun dating life. We did a lot of fun things. Here, any of you who are in a relationship, here's a relationship goal. Find good friends, go to the store, buy matching sweaters, and then go to Sears and get a photo taken. I guess Sears doesn't exist, so I don't know what, this was a date with us and Justin's parents, Dan and Lori. Yeah, this is the kind of stuff you can aspire to if you really know what you're doing in the dating life. This shows you that we were really good at it. But we were dating. Kim and I were dating about. You can take that down. It's hard to unsee it once you see it. It's kind of burnt. I wanted some of those songs to be burned in your head, and now that image is burned into your head. Kim and I were dating in about 2 years, and I went to Biola. I went to Orange Coast, and I transferred to Biola, and she transferred to Hope University. And so since we were going to two different colleges, we just came to that place of that Rachel Ross, we're gonna be on a break kind of thing. And we took a break from each other, and I started to go out on some dates with a girl at Biola. She started to date a guy at Hope. Now, 6 days a week, we didn't see each other. And then one day a week, we were here on campus and we see each other. And I knew she was dating this cool youth pastor in training at Hope. And I got super jealous. I got really jealous. And so I told the girl that I was kind of going on some dates with, I gave her some kind of line, how I couldn't do this any longer. And I set my course on winning Kim back. My jealousy got to the point of winning her back, and eventually I did, and of course we have this story of us being together, but we were married, I wanna say probably about 2 or 3 years. I was the youth pastor here, and Kim was working with me, and we went to, at the time, we would go to this place, we go to these conferences called the Youth Worker Convention, and there was all these youth pastors there and youth ministry people there. We were staying at this hotel conference room. We're leaving the conference to go to our hotel room, and we're in an elevator, a packed elevator, a lot of people, and it's stopping along the way. Everyone's kind of chatting, but this one guy is getting really chatty with Kim. And she's talking to him, and it's on and on until finally he gets to his floor and he walks off, and she just looks with like she doesn't know what's going on. And I said, you don't know who that is, do you? And she said, no. I said, that's your boyfriend from college. And she said, well, I don't have a great memory, but they never forget me. And I want to think it's because I was such a good husband that I made her forget her old boyfriends, but see, jealousy is not this virtue that we like to brag about. Jealousy in the Bible almost all the time is some kind of sin. So we see the warnings that come about, warnings to Corinth. There's jealousy that's dividing the church in Galatia. Jealousy is a fruit of the flesh. Romans, they are told to rid themselves of jealousy. So it's one of those things that we see all the time. Think of the Old Testament, the story of Saul and David. Saul is filled with jealousy over David, and it leads him to becoming quite evil. So jealousy is this one thing that we are to avoid. But as we end our series, we've been looking at this idea of who is like the Lord. And of course, the answer is no one is like him. He is high above all other beings, and he, in his greatness and his holiness and all these things. But we're looking at this moment where the Lord reveals himself. He reveals his name. his divine name, Yahweh, right? So we see it in the Bible. Anytime you see Lord in all caps, this is him being referred to as the I am. I am who I am. And who I am, I have always been and I will always be. And he reveals, as he reveals the I amness of himself, he tells us who he is and what he has always been and what we can always count on him to be, that he is compassionate and gracious. He has deep feelings for us and he acts out of those feelings to show us favor. He's slow to anger, right? He's long suffering with us. It takes a while for his anger to burn against us. He gives us a lot of space to turn around. That he is overflowing. He's abounding with loyal love. That he can't give up on us, that he won't give up on us. And then he's faithful, he's steady, he's our rock, he's our refuge. Who he is, who he's revealed himself to be, we can count on him to be that. Not that he would ever be fickle and try to change, that we couldn't count on him to be those things at any time. And his mercy tips the scales over justice. He is just, he will deal with sin, but his mercy is to the thousands of generations. But he does take sin seriously, and we will walk in that even as we close out our service. But there's one last thing that is mentioned in this passage that I think is kind of tricky for us because it feels awkward, and it's that Yahweh reveals that he is jealous. And it's one thing that I want us to see. In fact, it's mentioned multiple times in the Bible, and it's what I want us to explore as our big idea today, is that Yahweh is jealous for you. Not jealousy that you felt when your high school crush got asked by someone else to prom, right? It's a different kind of jealousy. It's not that Saul jealousy where, remember they're singing Saul has killed his thousands, but David his tens of thousands, and Saul just loses his mind. But there is something, there's this sense of this divine, good, godly jealousy. In fact, we see the Apostle Paul speak of a jealous love that he has for the church in Corinth. He says, I am jealous for you with a godly jealousy. I promise you to one husband, to Christ, so that I might present you as a pure virgin to him. He's saying, I have this fierce love for you. This jealous love, the way that Yahweh has a jealous or fierce love for those who are his own. This kind of godly jealousy, this jealous love he has for us, it is this desire that there's fidelity, there's faithfulness, it's marriage language, that we are his and he is ours. And it's a beautiful thing. Last week we introduced you to Tim. And I mentioned we were trying to be real careful with Tim, and we want to be real careful with Tim because one of the things we're praying for Tim is he and Julia, his wife, they've only been married, I think about 3-4 months now. So imagine as Tim comes, if he desires to give me his best because he's insecure in some way, and so he's given me his best effort and all his hours and his energy, and he's going home, and whatever he has left for Julia is kind of leftovers, but I receive his best. And Julia has this jealous love, right? You're my husband. Like, I'm your first prayer, I'm your ministry. I'm your first ministry, and she'd be right for that. I'd be failing as a boss if I failed him in this way. And so there's this way that we want to see the way that Yahweh loves us with this kind of fierce love of a spouse. What does it look like for us to respond to that passionate love that he has for us? This is not just a warm feeling. This is covenant love. This is committed love. And when we give ourselves to other loves, he feels it deeply. And so I want us to watch how Moses now responds to this whole moment and think about how can we respond in the same way. So turn to Exodus 34. Exodus 34. This is probably our last time in 2023 that we will be reading this together. And today, as we close, we When we end series, part of our culture here at Beachpoint is we do what's called remember and celebrate. We're gonna remember and celebrate through communion. But I'm also gonna give you kind of a way to practice some of the things that we have been talking about these things, and we're gonna think about how we can live these things out. So let's watch Moses respond, and let's think about how we might respond as well. Here's what I want you to do. I want you to try to imagine this story. I'm gonna read it to you one last time, but this time I want you to try, maybe just close your eyes and try to imagine it in your mind. Try to imagine, so Moses is asked, reveal your glory. And the Lord has said this, he's like, you can't take all of me, so here's what I'll do. There's a place on the mountain. I'll kind of tuck you into this little space in the rock to protect you. I'm going to give you a glimpse. I'll come by, I'll pass by, and I'll give you a glimpse, but you can't take all of me in. But let's imagine the Lord says, and you get to bring a friend, and you're the friend. Okay, so you're there. So I want you to try to imagine, what do you see? What do you hear? What does it feel like to be in this moment? Is it exciting? Is it scary? Is it overwhelming in some way? Are you filled with some emotion? What do you feel as you go through this? Exodus 34, I'm gonna start at verse 5. It says this. Then the Lord came down in the cloud and stood there with him and proclaimed his name, Yahweh, the Lord. And he passed in front of Moses proclaiming, Yahweh, Yahweh, the compassionate and gracious God, slow to anger, abounding in love and faithfulness, maintaining love to thousands and forgiving wickedness, rebellion, and sin. Yet he does not leave the guilty unpunished. He punishes the children and their children for the sin of the parents to the third and fourth generation. And Moses bowed to the ground at once and worshiped. Lord, he said, if I found favor in your eyes, then let the Lord go with us. Although this is a stiff-necked people, forgive our wickedness and our sin and take us as your inheritance. And then the Lord said, I'm making a covenant with you. Before all your people, I will do wonders never before done in any nation in all the world. The people you live among will see how awesome is the work that I, the Lord, will do for you. Obey what I command you today. I will drive out before you the Amorites, Canaanites, Hittites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites. Be careful not to make a treaty with those who live in the land where you are going, or they will be a snare among you. Break down their altars, smash their sacred stones, cut down their Asherah poles. Do not worship any other God, for the Lord, whose name is jealous, is a jealous God. There's a lot there that we want to unpack. We want to pay attention to Moses' response. We want to think about what Yahweh asks of Moses, and we want to think about what does it look like to respond to the one who for us also is compassionate and gracious, slow to anger, abounding in love and faithfulness. We want to think about what do we see from this. So what do we see from Moses? How do we do this ourselves? First, we see this, that you give Yahweh your worship. You give Yahweh your worship. So the first thing we see Moses do, his first response in verse 8 is what? He worships. He literally falls to the ground. I don't know how you saw it in your mind's eye, but imagine being caught up in the greatness of that moment. I mean, how would you not feel like you needed to fall to the ground, to bury your head in the ground, to just seek the mercy of God, realizing that in the greatness of what you were experiencing, and he worships him. What should the first response be to God's revelation of himself? It should be worship. It should be worship. And I love that this is an appropriate place to start, because we worship not so he will be compassionate and gracious with us, do we? Because he's already admitted, that's who I am. You don't have to worship so that I will be compassionate and gracious. I am compassionate and gracious. We don't worship hoping that God will hold back his anger from us. He already is slow to anger. He already is long-suffering with us. We don't worship in hopes that somehow now he will love us and somehow now he'll be faithful to us. He already is overflowing and abounding in love and faithfulness. We don't worship him hoping for his mercy. He already is pouring out his mercy to thousands of generations. This is who he is. We worship because it is the right thing to do. It is the logical thing to do. It is the best response to a God like Yahweh. In fact, this is what the Apostle Paul reveals when he is writing to the Roman church. He writes 11 chapters in the letter to the Romans about the beauty of the gospel, what God has done for us in Jesus. And then in chapter 12, he says, so here's how we respond. He says, therefore, I urge you, brothers and sisters, when you see God's mercy and view God's mercy, to do what? To offer your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and pleasing to God. This is true and proper worship. And what he's saying is, this is logical. This is what makes sense. This is the right response. When we see who he is, we worship him because it's the right thing to do. And we worship him because you will worship something. Notice the warnings that happen in verse 12. He calls out their temptation to other gods. See, the issue is not whether or not you will worship something. The question is, what are you going to worship? You will worship something. So why would we not worship the one who's compassionate and gracious, slow to anger, abounding in love and faithfulness to us, the one who loves us with a jealous love? Why would we not worship him? So let me make a suggestion to today's teaching. If you have your phone with you or you're writing notes, in the notes section on your phone or in the notes if you're writing, I want you to write down these 3 phrases. Start your day, fill your day, end your day. And leave some space under each of them. Start your day, fill your day, end your day. This is kind of the end of summer, right? This weekend. Maybe not technically, but it feels like it. Some of you are already, like summer ended, you're already back teaching or doing, like you're back in school. But this really feels like the end of a season, the beginning of a new season. My question for you is, as you go into this new season, what rhythms, what habits are you going to have develop your life in the next season you go through? How will you start your day? How will you fill your day? How will you end your day? What rhythms, what habits, spiritual habits can form you, can shape you? I want you to think about this idea of worship. How can you start your day with worship? How can you fill your day with worship? How can you end your day with worship? Maybe it's one of the songs that we did today. At the end of the service, we'll point out again that all the songs are listed. You can take a photo of it and kind of find them and make your own little playlist. Maybe it's a prayer you have, or a devotion you do. Maybe there's a way in your life group where you text each other and hold each other accountable to things. How will you develop rhythms in the fall to live as a person of worship? This is the first response. The second response is that we seek Yahweh's presence and power. We seek his presence and power. Moses is he's going to make a big ask. He's asking for the presence of the Lord to go with them. And Yahweh is going to offer back not only his presence, but his power. This is a big ask. I don't know if you've ever made a big ask or you can remember the last big ask you made. I always get I always cringe a little bit if you've ever been at like a professional event and on the Jumbotron, a proposal is about to happen. Because I just like, man, if this goes wrong, it's gonna go really, really wrong. In fact, this one right here says something about Dolphin fans. This guy wasn't even in his seat when this went on the scoreboard. Okay, the girl's there, the camera's on her, it comes up on the screen. Now there was a miscommunication. He thought he was supposed to be in the aisle and they were gonna all come out together. He wasn't getting a hot dog, so don't blame the guy. But these big ask moments, right? Where everything can go wrong. Look at verse 9. Notice, I want you to look at verse 9 and verse 10. There's a little tiny distinction in the way that you see Moses refer to God in this moment. Moses says, he calls to the Lord. But do you notice anything different about how he refers to the Lord and how the Lord refers to himself in verse 10? Now, if you've been paying attention over the last couple weeks, you'll remember something about this. What do you see in verse 9 that's different from verse 10 in the way that he refers to the Lord and the way that the Lord refers to himself? Anyone bold enough to try to take a shot at it? What was it, Brenda? All caps. He doesn't refer to him in all caps though, does he? He refers to him as Lord, right? So he's cowering in this moment, and this happens 4 different times in Moses. We know Moses is a reluctant leader. We know he's a humble leader. We know that there's times where he's just like, this, I'm not the right guy for this, but he's about to make a big ask, and notice what he's doing. He kind of pulls back, cowers back, and he, in essence, says, Master. He doesn't call him by his name, and he's saying, look, we have been a failure up to this point, and we will probably fail you again, but will you take us as our inheritance? And he's kind of, I don't think he's not worried about his safety. He just realizes, I can't believe I'm asking this. And in verse 10, Yahweh responds. And how does he respond? He responds true to his character. Verse 10, he doesn't ask for anything. He takes them back, warts and all. He covenants with them before he asks for anything from them. He commits himself to them. There's no conditions there, is there? He first gives himself fully to them. Why? Because that's who he is. He loves them with a loyal love. And he offers them exactly what they've asked for. They have sinned up to this point. They've rebelled up to this point. And he says, I forgive all that. And I will take you as my possession. I will go with you. And then he not only promises his presence, he offers his power. And you think you've seen some things so far? Notice what he's saying. He's saying, you haven't seen anything yet. Look, he's not promising them that if I go with you, you won't have problems. Can we just say, yeah, that's true, okay? The Lord's promise of his presence does not mean a worry-free, trouble-free life. What he does offer, though, is his presence and his power in this. And if that's true, then I have to ask you once again, how will you think about this? How will you start your day, fill your day, end your day by thinking about the Lord's presence? So look at that list again. Start your day, fill your day, end your day. How can you build rhythm in your life to start your day with a sense of the Lord's presence? He is with you. Jesus has promised his disciples, I will be with you until the very end of this age. Until the time comes when he returns. He wants you to know, I am in it with you. Not like he's just hovering, like he's in the office down the hall. He is with you. Through his presence, through his spirit, he is with us. How will you start your day? How will you fill your day? How will you end your day? I think there is one of the blessings that I think this church gets is Kim and I have a dog, and you get 2 prayer walks a day. So our dog sees to it that you get 2 prayer walks every day. So Kim starts her day by going on a prayer walk with her dog. Her dog wakes up and says, hey, we got to start praying for these people. Let's go. I have trees to visit. There's other dogs to sniff. I have things to do, and you have things to do. At night, I have that. He's waiting for me, but you are blessed. If anything happens to Maverick, someone should show up at our house. It's for your goodness. You should show up at our house with a very cute puppy because we won't want another dog. But this is a way that we live in the presence of God on your behalf. I want you to think about this. Justin, a few weeks ago, invited you to a prayer at the end of the day called the prayer of examine. It's a prayer as we pray through our day. At the end of the day, we pray through, being mindful, how did we notice the Lord in our day? And we acknowledge it, and we thank God, and we pray through those things that we see. But we also have a chance to say, hey, I missed that, or there was an opportunity you were inviting me into, and I didn't jump into it. but I don't want it to be like this tomorrow. And it even ends with a sense of intention of tomorrow I want to see your presence. I don't want to miss your presence tomorrow. How will you start your day? How will you fill your day? How will you end your day? Well, one last thing that we want to look at in this series, here it is this is now Yahweh speaking back. And he says this, he asked for something. He asked for the allegiance of our lives. The third thing that we do is we give Yahweh the allegiance of your life. You give Yahweh the allegiance of your life. He has committed himself to them, and now he's asking that they commit themselves back. This is strong language. Now, in the ancient world, you worshiped many gods, but he's asking that this be an exclusive relationship. Notice how serious the language is there at the end. In fact, there's a lot of allusions to marriage in this. It's an idea of a covenant, of making vows to each other. In fact, the language at the end really it's adultery language, that if you in essence, go after these other gods, it's like you're cheating on me. And I'm gonna feel it. Like a jealous, I'm gonna feel abandoned by you. I just did a wedding a few weeks ago, this great couple, Lance and Colette. So imagine it this way, they're standing up here and I've got them. I turn to Colette. I've said, Colette, do you? I do. Lance, do you? I do. I say, these are vows you're making to each other in front of your family and friends. Colette, repeat after me. I, Colette, take you, Lance, to be my wedded husband, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, in sickness and health, for richer, for poorer, to love and to cherish, till death do us part. And she's saying this with tear-filled eyes. You know, her voice is trembling. She realizes the gravity of what she's saying. And then I turn to her, Lance, I'm like, yeah, you're good. And I just kind of keep going through. And everyone's like, whoa. Wait, you forgot something. You forgot to ask Lance for vows. Like, yeah, I mean, it's up to Lance. He can do whatever he wants to do, right? Some of you would be like, what kind of liberal pastor, what kind of crazy, this is not right? This is the language here at the end. It is the expectation that I'm gonna give myself fully to you. But for us to be in a relationship that's gonna work, you have to give yourself fully back to me. It's commitment, it's fidelity, it's allegiance. It's saying, I give you, my intent is to give you all of my life. This is the language that is shown there. And he says that this, because he is jealous for him. He has this jealous love for them, right? This fierce, passionate, zealous love for them. But he also is jealous for his name. One of the ways that you could actually translate that line more literally is that he is jealous for his name. He's protective of his name. That if we say we're in a relationship together, we live that out. And if we don't live that out, we don't show it, then in some ways something is off. We are invited to show the world what he is like, not only by what we say, but by how we live. Let me give you one last quote from John Mark Comer and his book, God Has a Name. He says it so well. That's what Yahweh is after, a people who are godly, who are like the God they worship. A people who are compassionate, a people who are gracious, a people who are slow to anger, a people who are abounding in love and faithfulness, a people who live in the tension of mercy and justice. Now, wouldn't that really be something? I mean, this is what we want. This is who we are. And we know as the church, this is what we are called to be. That we are invited into this whole life of reconciliation between us and God. But then as we experience reconciliation between us and God, we then go into the world and call to the world that they are being invited into reconciliation. 2 Corinthians chapter 5, I'll just skip down to verse 20. It says that we are Christ's ambassadors, as though God were making his appeal through us, right? God is using us in this world to make him known, to make his life known, to make his peace known. And so what happens here on Sunday has to matter on Monday. And what happens in your life group, or what happens in your youth group, or in any other thing where you gather together, what happens in those sacred spaces has to be lived out in our homes, in our schools, in our workplaces, our neighborhoods. Our faith cannot just exist in these safe places of worship and gathering, but in these places, then we go out and we bear his name. And when we give our allegiance to some other thing, when on Sunday we're all in on him, but then on Monday, we're all in on something else. It's as if we're cheating on him. And he feels that. He feels it with a jealous love. That somehow this God of power or wealth or influence or whatever it is, that somehow pleasure, that this God somehow has foothold in your life. He feels it deeply. And he loves you with a jealous love, and he knows that there's no way that other thing can love you like he can. So rhythms. How do you start your day? How do you fill your day? How do you end your day with a sense of intention and commitment and allegiance? How do you do this? Some people do simply this. When they wake up in the morning, they start their day this way, that when their feet touch the floor, it is a moment of pause. It is a 10-second prayer to simply say, today, Lord, I thank you that I have this new day, and this day is yours. My buddy here, he prays, Lord, who do you want me to bless today? This is starting your day with intention, with allegiance, with commitment. I am yours and you are mine. How do we live in that rhythm? Beachpoint. Isn't this how we want to be? And isn't this who we want people, when people see us, don't you hope that they will see in us compassion and grace? We're slow to anger, abounding in love and faithfulness. We live in that tension of mercy and justice. This is who we want to be. So this is the prayer as we end this series. How can you start your day? Fill your day, end your day with worship, with presence, with allegiance. How do we do this? As we close our service, what I want us to do is to actually live in one of those moments where all three of these things come together in one beautiful moment. I'm not asking you to figure out 9 new things to do when you go home, okay? Some of these things are just gonna really overlap. Right? A prayer in the morning of intention is a prayer that has a sense, it has worship to it. It has presence, you're acknowledging presence. It has commitment. There's ways in which there's overlap with these things, but this moment when we join together at the Lord's table, this is a moment where these 3 worlds, these 3 things come all together. We are worshiping the one who's drawn near to us, and we're reminded of his commitment to us, his allegiance to us. Yahweh has come close to us. In Jesus, we see Yahweh in the flesh. John 1 says, the word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. We've seen his glory. In Jesus, we are brought and we're seeing the glory of all who he is. And if you think about it, we see in story after story, in moment after moment in Jesus' life, the character of God. We see it all being lived out in so many beautiful ways. And we know this to be true. See, for us, in sinful jealousy, we hurt people. I mean, humankind is prone to kill. But the Lord, in loving jealousy, dies. He gives himself. He gives himself for us. He takes on our sin for us. How zealous he is, how passionate he is, how jealousy, how he loves us. How he loves us. And so this is a time, tangible time, to remember that he is compassionate and gracious to you. And you can have a moment to pray and to say, Lord, you delight in me. And sometimes I don't know why, but I know this to be true. And Jesus gave us this so that we remember, we'd have something tangible to remember, because he knows, remember, Moses says, look, we struggle and we fail and we probably don't deserve this, but will you take us? And the Lord does. And so Jesus has given us, because there's going to be given us this way to remember him, because he knows there'll be moments where we say, there's no way you want me right now. But he says, when you eat and when you drink, I want you to remember what I've done for you. That even while you were a sinner, I have died for you. He lives this way for us. And so the response to this is to put our faith in him. Here's what I'd like to do. I'm gonna invite the band up here. I'm gonna put on the screen what probably for many of you is a very familiar verse, John 3:16 and 17. And I want us just to read it out loud together before we take communion together. Would you read this out loud with me on the screen? For God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son, that whoever believes in him shall not perish but have eternal life. For God did not send his Son into the world to condemn the world, but to save the world through him. Jesus doesn't want you to believe things about him. He wants you to believe him. He wants you to give him your life. He wants to stand at the altar with you and say, I am all yours. Will you be all mine? And so as we take the bread and the cup, Jesus took bread, he broke it. He said, this is my body broken for you. Eat this in remembrance of me. He took a cup, he passed it. He said, this cup is my blood shed for the forgiveness of your sins. Drink it in remembrance of me. And we eat this bread and we drink this cup to proclaim his death until he comes again. In this moment, when you're ready, I want to invite you to worship him, to seek his presence, to, like Moses, confess your sin, but to ask for his presence and ask for his power and to offer him your life. When you're ready, eat, drink, and remember him.